right, hi everyone. Today we welcome on Brian Friend to the Hickory podcast. He is a lead CrossFit analyst and journalist for the Bar Bend website, and he's formerly covered and featured on the Morning Chalk Up. You could also find him on the Savon podcast as a frequent and a whole host of different, CrossFit news outlets. Let's just jump right in, Brian. It's good to see you. Can you give me a little breakdown of what is CrossFit and kind of a little history of what drew you to CrossFit?
Yeah, I think CrossFit, depending on what your level of awareness or introduction to it, can take on a lot of different things for different people. Originally, it was meant to be a more scientific approach to defining health and fitness. And the derivative of that was basically a lifestyle or a methodology for nutrition and exercise that would be sustainable over a lifetime. In more modern times, it's evolved into many other things, including a sport. And there are certainly people whose first exposure to CrossFit is or was on ESPN or CBS or in the news as part of the sport as it's grown over the last 15 years since its origins in 2007. But if that's your only exposure to CrossFit, then you are missing the big picture and the original foundation of what this thing is all about.
Absolutely. That's very interesting. And, to give a little preface to our audience, I met you at a CrossFit gym, and I actually started doing CrossFit in more recent years when I moved out to California. And what you said is really interesting, because I think there's this kind of dichotomy in the CrossFit world of, kind of the more casual nature where, the everyday user can use this CrossFit formula to stay healthy. And then there's the CrossFit games. Am I correct in kind of this dichotomy? And how do you balance that out in CrossFit when you're coaching and you're teaching people about CrossFit, whether they're going to be a full-on CrossFit game person or kind of the casual, less serious, trying to stay fit lifestyle?
Mostly, I try to follow the model that CrossFit headquarters or HQ has laid out for the community to take hold of. And several years ago in 2018, there was a large feeling that there might be a split, and we might see CrossFit Health become its own thing and the sport of CrossFit kind of diverge into a separate entity. Over the years since then, CrossFit HQ has made it pretty clear that they don't want that to happen, and that they see these two things being supportive of each other. And so the sport can drive people to the affiliates, and the affiliates can drive people to the sport. And that if there's a more well-rounded understanding in both realms about all of the different things that CrossFit can potentially be for a community or an individual, that it's kind of like a rising tides lifts all ships, that everyone can benefit from those things. So they didn't want the distinction in terms of business. And therefore, when I talk to people about it in the gym or at competitions, I think that it's important personally to keep in mind, both aspects of what CrossFit can be, to help shape a more complete conversation about, whatever the topic is within the greater picture of CrossFit that we happen to be conversing over.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. What exactly defines, I guess, CrossFit Health then, for our audience?
The best story that I can tell you about the health when it comes to CrossFit is a story that's, documented and cataloged by Greg Glassman, who's the founder of CrossFit. And, he had been practicing or refining this idea of CrossFit since the late 70s. And at some point, he opened the first CrossFit gym in California, and he had some pretty cool stories about clients early on. And one of the stories that he tells is that he had people come in and they would sit down and they would have a conversation, getting to know each other. And he'd ask them to write down 5 things that they'd like to improve in their life over the next year. But he didn't want to know what they were. And these things could run the full spectrum from I want to lose weight to I want to improve my blood pressure to I want to have a more healthy relationship with my kids, or I want to get out of this job that I hate, or My financial situation is in crisis. And didn't matter what it was. He was confident that if you wrote down the 5 things, any 5 things that you wanted to improve over a year, and you were willing to listen to his advice about eating and come in and show up and work hard a few times, 4 or 5 times a week, regularly over a year, that we could pull that note card out 12 months later. And he was sure that all 5 of those things would have taken a turn in the positive direction.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because it goes beyond just like that normal physical goals. It's these lifestyle goals, and it encompasses more than just that physical fitness nature, in my understanding.
And the reason for that is because if you generally eat well and you generally move on a regular basis, you're setting yourself up biologically to be more equipped to deal with the things that come our way in life that can be challenging.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's ever done a CrossFit workout, you know that it's hard. And it doesn't matter if it's your first day or you've been doing it for 10 years.
Yeah.
It's hard relative to your experience. And when you put yourself in an environment willingly and voluntarily on a regular basis to do hard things, then when you find yourself in a situation in which you have to do something hard that you don't maybe want to do, you're more prepared to handle it.
Oh, absolutely. Then you have that mental strength too. It goes beyond that physical strength, is that you can push yourself even further in whatever regard it might be. I think in another aspect for me, in my personal experience with CrossFit, as one of the more casual, stay fit kind of people in that world, is the community. So I was in California, and I would go to 4:30 class every day, and everybody was, it was the same people every day. It's, hi, how we doing? How's your job? How's your life? And you get to know people. And I think that's obviously, there's a lot of group class things in fitness, but that was a big thing for me in the draw to CrossFit. I don't know if you've seen the same thing, but I could go in 4:30, know people, know their lives. It's essentially like you go to hell with them, and then you get closer. That bond comes closer. So that's another aspect that I wanted to highlight, and I'm not sure if you have a similar experience with that too.
Certainly. There's another story of Glassman's going way back, and he would say, if you're in the garage rowing by yourself, and someone walks into the garage and just happens to look over your shoulder at the rower, I can guarantee you that the numbers are going to drop. Like, you're going to start rowing a little faster. And he liked to joke that it didn't matter if it was your wife or your friend or your dog. When there's someone else around, you're going to work a little harder.
Yeah.
And secondarily is just the accountability. Is, if you don't show up for a day or two to that 4:30 class, there's going to be someone that reaches out and say, hey, Will, what's up, man? Missed you at the gym the last 2 days.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, so in addition to the shared suffering, which is obviously something that bonds humans together and always has in every, aspect of life, there's that little checks and balances of, if I don't show up, I know I'm going to hear from these people. And if they don't show up, they're going to hear it from me too.
Yeah.
And then, of course, just the ability to push a little bit harder. Like we said, the workouts aren't easy. And when you're in the middle of, a 7-round workout and you're in round 3 and you realize you're not even halfway and you want to stop, and you look around and you see everyone else is also hurting or still working or fighting through and finding a way, you're more likely to do it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to kind of dive in a little bit into your background, switch gears a little bit to kind of how you got into CrossFit, what point in your life, where were you at? And essentially, how did, I'm not sure about where you were at, but how did a consistent, passion and consistent workout schedule kind of adjust and alter your life? If you have any thoughts on that.
Sure. Yeah. I played sports my entire life, and all the way through college, I played soccer. And coming out of that, without even realizing it, suddenly I didn't have anything to do that was like an organized sport. So I took up running, and I tried to become good at running, which is kind of a natural progression from soccer, I suppose. And then my life took a big turn, and I had an opportunity to go and live and work in the Dominican Republic, where that painting is from.
I see the painting in the back.
And while I was there, some of my friends started doing CrossFit. Some of my friends from my college soccer team, and actually a few of those that I grew up with as well. But I didn't really know much about it. I ended up coming out of that experience in the Dominican Republic and trying to pursue a long-term and serious relationship with a woman. And that ended very poorly for me, which happens. And I was pretty devastated, heartbroken, depressed, you might say. And my friends were awesome. And they came by my place and they knocked on my door and they dragged me off the couch and to the gym, and like literally off the couch into the gym. And you know, there's a short saying in CrossFit that really captures the essence of it in a very simple way, which is off the couch and off the carbs. And I never have had such a big problem with carbs, but I was certainly spending too much time on the couch at that time of my life. And I was a terrible client. I was a huge nuisance to the coaches the first couple of days. I was resistant to being there. I thought I just wasn't in a good place, but they were super patient with me. And they let me come back and keep coming back. And my friends made sure I kept coming back. And it was, you know, it's one of those things where without really realizing that was happening, before long, it was the hour of the day I was looking forward to most, because it was the hour of the day I was thinking about her least. And those things take time, but that was the thing that distracted me. And even though it was only an hour, it was an hour, and that felt so freeing. And so it was, you know, it wasn't the pursuit of elite fitness or the fact that I needed to lose weight. It was something that was not necessarily planned. And I'm really grateful that my friends gave me that opportunity. And then, you know, that was the seed that ended up growing into what is now the center point of my life, personally and professionally.
That's incredible. I think that I think a lot of people can relate to the idea of heartbreak and getting in the gym soon after there, or using some way to get by with that. So then I have a question of when did CrossFit transform from this release from this heartbreak or wherever you were in life to this ultimate passion? You know, and how did that passion nurture over time, and how did that grow? And when did you know that you were just fully in on CrossFit? Because you are essentially one of the biggest and most popular CrossFit analysts in the world, in an up and coming sport, but you are kind of on the forefront of that. So where did that passion come from, and how did you know that when it arrived?
I think it happened just kind of organically as a you know, it's kind of a steps in a staircase process over the last, I guess it's been 9 years now. And but early on, in addition to enjoying going to the gym, I found out that CrossFit had become a sport. And one of the qualifying events to the CrossFit Games was taking place in Chicago at Navy Pier in 2014. And my buddies and I went down there and we watched. And I have always had this, it's like in my nature to make up games and contests and stuff like that. And so I followed the rest of the qualifiers, and then we had the CrossFit Games field for 2014. And I made a little game for my friends and I to play to help follow along. 2 years later, I was still doing that. And I decided I wanted to go to the CrossFit Games. So I invited one of those guys. Well, I invited all of them, but one of them decided to go. My dad decided to go, which was really cool because I was able to share that with him at that point. And we went out to Carson, California and watched the 2016 CrossFit Games. So that week, we watched almost 100 hours of CrossFit, and we watched the masters divisions, the team competition, the teenagers, and of course, the elite individual men and women. And I think that was, you know, a really important moment for me, where I realized that I was, you know, extremely passionate about this. I had been exploring a little bit the methodology, some of the old CrossFit Games stuff, a little bit of the original CrossFit Journal articles, and learning more. But coming out of that, I decided that I wanted to actually go to a level 1 seminar, which is, you know, a critical component of understanding CrossFit's methodology and origins, but also a huge part of their business model. Is to, you know, it's a very low barrier to entry. Anyone can sign up. It costs $1,000. You go for a weekend and you get a pretty well rehearsed and very well delivered introduction to CrossFit. And anyone can go to that. You don't have to be doing CrossFit. You don't have to want to coach. It's just a great place to learn. So I did that in 2017. I started coaching part-time shortly after that. I had been coaching, actually. I've been teaching in high school and coaching soccer and football, the kickers on the football team. And And then I started coaching a little bit in a gym part-time. That eventually became full-time. And I have coached at a few different gyms. And along the way, at some point, I took a chance and reached out to the media director at CrossFit. And he liked what I had to say and gave me an opportunity to contribute to his podcast, which was the CrossFit podcast at the time, including and flying me out to California to be on their show. And I guess I didn't screw it up too badly, because from there, they invited me to those same qualifiers that I first went to in 2014 in Navy Pier. And I went to one in Albany, New York, Del Mar, California, West Palm Beach, Florida in 2018. And we did podcasts from there. And it was the definition of trial by fire. The first podcast I ever did, we had the second fittest man on earth at the time, or the third fittest man, maybe. The next one was the fittest woman on earth. And the one after that was her coach. In California, we had on some legends of the sport. And then we had Dave Castro, who was the creator of the CrossFit Games. And there was no script, there was no rehearsal. And I was completely dependent on the 4 years of learning that I had done on my own.
Yeah.
And was good enough, I guess. I knew enough to hold my own on that podcast. And that was the runway to everything that's come since then.
Oh, absolutely. And that's such an exact point that I kind of wanted to get to, because I'd heard, a similar story from you on a different podcast when I was prepping. And I feel like I've followed a similar path that you did. We both kind of essentially found a passion, and mine is in renewable energy, and I'll explain it a little bit. But we both found a passion early on where we didn't necessarily know where it was going to take us, but we put part of our time and effort into it. We didn't really necessarily have a career that was going to come out of it. We didn't know what was going to happen, but it was just a passion that we would, kind of a hobby that we pursued and we learned about. And you spent, like you said, 4 years of just following CrossFit, making up games, thinking about it, and researching it, doing the due diligence, but just because you liked it and you are passionate about it. And then over time, it slowly develops into an opportunity where you can start to, make a career out of it and base your life out of it. And I had a similar kind of track as well, where once I had those opportunities pop up, I was already ready to hit the ground running, where I had done all of the background research, and I know the industry better than most people, because I was so passionate about it previously, without like a immediate reward. And I'm curious as to your thoughts on that idea. But, overall, I think one quote that can encompass it is, success is when preparation meets opportunity. So these opportunities come in our lives at some point, and we don't know when they are, but our job is to be prepared when they do. And I think that that's kind of a model that we've both employed and gotten us to where we are today.
Yeah, it's I think I'll share a little story with you that probably haven't been able to find on a podcast before. Before any of that's the stuff that we've talked about so far, I had some difficulties with drugs and alcohol, and I had eventually been relegated to really one opportunity remaining, which was to go to rehab. And I went there, and in a very similar fashion to when I first went to the CrossFit gym, I was a very unreasonable and unruly disciple. And it was maybe a week or so into my time there at the in-house inpatient facility that I was at, and we were doing evening meditations as we did every night, and I was pretty frustrated. Yes, I'm going to just meditate, and I didn't even know what meditating was at the time, really. And all of a sudden, something completely unexpected happened, and I had a vision in my mind, and I still refer to it as above the clouds. And the vision was a white floor of clouds with a blue sky and a black. The only thing I could describe it as is like a black moving walkway, like you might find on a flat escalator in the airport that you could stand on and carry you forward.
Yeah.
Except there were no railings. And I came out of this moment, and it was just a moment, realizing that there's a path there, and there may be several paths, I don't know, and that you can stay on the path if you want to, and perhaps if you do, that things like that will happen, but that you're not confined to the path. and you're free to leave, but you don't know what's below the clouds. And it's a metaphor that I'm sure has a meaning for many different, many different things for many different people. But as you're talking about that, the preparation meeting opportunity, it's like every day in our life, there's an opportunity to make decisions. And when we make relatively good decisions consistently over time, we do set ourselves up for the opportunity to capitalize on potentially unexpected opportunities that come our way.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we all appreciate you sharing that story with us, because it is truly inspirational. I mean, life is a lot of ups and flows. It's ups and downs, and it's how we pick ourselves up. And I think that that's inspiring to our audience, is because whether it's with struggles in different worlds, there's always that release and how to pick yourself up. And I think that you are a true model of that, because look at you now. You're killing it. You're absolutely killing it. So I want to switch a little bit, and I break a little bit from CrossFit. Actually, I'm going to have one last CrossFit question, and then I'm going to kind of dive a little bit deeper into the Hickory side of things and the health and from there. Last question for CrossFit: who is the GOAT?
Oh man. Well, if people who know CrossFit know that this is a hotly debated conversation, there's only three possible answers. They are Rich Froning, Matt Fraser, and Tia-Clair Toomey. Tia-Clair Toomey is without a doubt the greatest female CrossFitter that's ever lived. And the record she's setting right now will be very difficult for anyone to chase down. Matt Fraser, I believe, was the most dominant CrossFit athlete during the time that he competed. And I could talk about that for hours. But I will always say that Rich Froning is the greatest of all time. He's the one that made it possible what Matt and Tia did. He's really, in the way that Michael Jordan redefined earning potential for basketball players, and Tiger Woods redefined what was possible for a professional golfer. And we see now so many people in those realms that you want to compare what they do on the court or on the golf course or on the field of competition at CrossFit. Someone has to lay the framework, the groundwork, and create the potential opportunity for the future generations. Not only did Rich do that as an individual, he continued to compete in the team competition, has now accumulated 10 career championships, and in my opinion is the biggest inspiration for the growth of the sport. He also has, I think, critically been an affiliate owner for over 10 years and helped to create and foster an incredible environment in Cookeville, Tennessee for his community. And I think the summation of all those things makes it a pretty easy to say that as far as an all-around contributor to the sport and CrossFit community, Rich Froning's the best that there ever was.
I love that. It's almost like he's the godfather. Could you say?
Sure.
Sure. All right, fair enough. Well, that was a good little clip that we can just make controversial statements about the CrossFit GOAT, and put it out there. But let's shift a little bit.
Hey, well, I got a question here.
Yeah.
Because hey, Brian, I'm Sharon. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Sharon.
A very dear friend of mine has a son who had addiction issues and tried to commit suicide many times, and then he got involved in CrossFit. And when he became, I don't know, feeling better about himself and doing amazing stuff, his father came in and also did CrossFit. So he was able to handle his addiction issues, and his father joined him. They reunited as a family, with a positive, really incredible future together. And they're doing this to this day. They're doing CrossFit to this day. I think CrossFit saved his life. So
I believe so too, based on the little bit that I know. Thank you for sharing that. And it's, it's like that note card, the 5 things on his list were not going to be to have bulging muscles and run a 5-minute mile. There were way more important things, life related things that have certainly improved for him and his family since having that opportunity. And there are stories like that. And every one of the 10,000 plus global affiliates right now, And those are like that's the danger of the sport, is that if you only see the sport, you don't necessarily have the awareness of those things. And that's why I've made it a priority, despite, as Will has mentioned, having increased opportunity within the sport to travel and work to help bring the sport forward, that I still love working at the gym. And I work at the CrossFit gym here in Highwood, Illinois, and that's my full-time job. And it's my top priority, because I think that the potential to impact change there is more powerful than anywhere else.
I just
So
want to
thank
say,
you.
both Will and I work out at that gym, and that's how we got to know you. And there is such a sense of community there, which Will alluded to earlier, that everyone supports each other. And I do think that's a big factor, for example, in the friend that you know, Sharon, that it's not just the working out and being tough, like you mentioned earlier. It's that community, that feeling like you belong to something. I think that is somewhat unique, I think, to CrossFit. Now, there may be other classes that people take, like yoga and stuff, that they do feel that, but I definitely see it even more so in the CrossFit gym. And I would assume you guys agree.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm sure Brian does too, I think. So, I just want to kind of switch bases a little bit, talk about you, Brian. And, since we, as a friend of yours, and listening to the podcast and getting to know you, I understand that a lot of your life kind of revolves around helping others and following others, analyzing CrossFit athletes, coaching at the local gym, helping others, getting the word of CrossFit out. Do you feel that this is kind of how you fulfill yourself, or if this is something that you actively pursue, and if so, why do you think that is, that you are such a natural born leader in helping others and guiding others, and why that is?
I have spent some time reflecting on this, especially in the past year or so, as my name has become more well known and I've been more present on more public platforms. I think it's incredibly important personally for me to not lose sight of where I came from and the people that made those things possible. You see it happen all the time, where the power goes to someone's head, or prestige or fame, or substitute any of these words. And I actually feel like I'm in a really pretty cool dynamic right now of balance, where I feel just as fulfilled and inspired and continuing to learn from a variety of people in the areas that I spend most of my time, as I have the opportunity to give those things back.
Yeah.
And being a coach at a CrossFit gym over a long period of time is kind of a unique situation to be in. I mean, most of the people come most days of the week, and they develop a certain level of comfortability with you as their coach. They may open up to you about certain things. They may tell you things that you don't want to hear at times, and certainly some personal stuff and some really cool life accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's easy to look at the coach as someone who is a leader and who is a dependable part of the community, and someone that you can confide in. What I don't think that people necessarily always realize is how motivating those people are for me. And that, sorry, I'm getting a little emotional actually, because I've seen some of them start there and know what they could or couldn't do, or never thought they'd be able to do.
Yeah.
And then to see them realize some of those things. I've seen them go through really difficult times and come out the other side of it, and say things like, I don't know if I could have done that if not for what we do here.
Yeah.
And actually, I made a post about this recently, and it's something I could never really relate to personally, but I think it's amongst the most powerful things I've ever seen, is pregnant women continue to train through their pregnancy.
Yeah.
And then come out of the other side, and they need to take a little bit of time, a week to a month off, depending on how the birthing went, but they come back stronger than ever. And I think that there's a lot of people who don't know what to do when you're pregnant, and you think so many things have to change in your life, but they don't have to change that much. You just have to adapt and find a way and be resilient.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think from the physician point of view, you don't want to take on a new physical activity, but you can maintain what you were used to doing, like you say, with modifications. So yeah, you don't have to stop when you're pregnant. And obviously the women in the gym know that because they keep going.
They do.
Just based off of that reaction, I mean, obviously we can tell that, your life is very focused around helping others. You just got emotional just even thinking about the progress that you've helped others achieve. And that's just super inspiring. Have you noticed that from a young age, or is this something kind of you developed recently where it's like, you find a lot of fulfillment out of creating these games? For example, I remember a couple years ago, I had read all the Harry Potter's books again, and you came up to me and you said, I got a game for you. You wrote 7 questions down. You gave me a Harry Potter quiz just while I was working out. And luckily, I think I got 6 out of 7 or something like that. You're impressed, but I mean, these are things that you do all the time. And I'm curious, was this something that, you knew from an early age, you enjoy and you take satisfaction out of helping others and seeing them progress? Or is this something that, you've kind of come to terms with over the more recent years?
In processing that question, I'm reminded of more of a story. I have vague memories of this, but it's more something my parents told me. It was when I was in kindergarten. There was a student in our class. It was a fairly small class, maybe 20 to 25 students. And one of the students was, I'm not sure what the technical term is now, but he was a special needs student. But he was integrated into the class at the time. And this is obviously many years ago. And, the dynamic of that in schools now has evolved and changed quite a bit. But he was in the class with us, and he was at times very problematic, throwing blocks at the other kids, throwing tantrums, yelling and screaming, and not necessarily in control of all his behaviors. Not only have my parents told me about this, but the kindergarten teacher actually wrote me a letter when she retired, I think, and talked about how I was the only one in the class that could handle this guy, that could deal with him. And
awesome.
I don't have a ton of memories about it, but when I think back to hearing something about that from a young age, it makes me think 2 things. And one is that maybe I was, for whatever reason, given a gift to empathize with people who may be difficult for others to relate to. But the memories I do have of him was I feel the same way that I do about the people that I work with now, which is that they give to me just as much as I give to them. And I saw his struggle, and it motivated me in times of struggle as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it warms my heart to hear that too. I love that. So, on this podcast, the Hickory podcast, we have this thing called the Triple H, and that is a breakdown of what keeps these amazing individuals such as yourself that we are interviewing hopeful, what keeps them healthy, and what keeps them healing. And I want to ask you each individually, we'll start with the healing portion, because I know I've seen you many times with the the massage gun and the wraps and the shoulder brace and the ice. So maybe not even just the physical healing, but how do you kind of restore those batteries, recharge, and in both a physical sense, in a mental sense, in a spiritual sense, and gets you ready for the next moment? How do you recover?
That's actually a pretty good analogy to talk about some of the massage guns and the body therapy there, because that's an ongoing process. I've been working out 5-6 days a week consistently for 9 years, and the body goes through some tough things. And one of the only ways that I've been able to manage that is to have small amounts of consistent body work, sometimes a lot of times self-administered, on a regular basis over time. And I will lean into a principle from the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous here to make this analogy. But they have it's a similar concept when it comes to emotional healing that we need as humans. We all have challenges that we go through in our life, and a lot of them are scarring, and a lot of them are heavy, and a lot of them are difficult to deal with. And I have found that it's far easier and more sustainable for me to do that consistently over time than to try to do like the blunt force trauma all at once. So, and instead of going to see a chiropractor that's going to do some very intense work on my body once every 6 months, I do the little stuff every day. And I have found the same thing to be helpful in the emotional therapy, self-therapy or regulation over time, is that, it's just a little check-in at night, basically, of, what were there things today that I need to have a healing process with? And then if so, can I, is it possible for me to address them now within myself or otherwise, or is it something that maybe I should consider reaching out to someone about tomorrow? Yeah. I think in general, holding on to things like that, even if they might seem silly, I can't tell you the number of times I've called someone and said, hey, I know that this may or may not be a big deal to you, but it is to me. And I've been thinking about this, and I just would like to tell you I'm sorry, or, I really appreciated this thing that you did for me, or whatever the conversation is. Sometimes we can't have those conversations, but even the acknowledgement of it to yourself, or maybe if you have a higher power that you believe in, again, to borrow a term from AA, that you can communicate those things audibly, and it can be pretty healing in the moment. And I think that the small work over time, sometimes you have to do the big work up front.
Yeah.
To account for maybe years or decades of neglect.
Yeah.
But having done that, if you can do it consistently over time, I think that it will create an opportunity for the emotional body to respond very much like the physical body which is to develop a resiliency as you do it more regularly.
Yeah, I think that consistency is one of the big things that has changed my life, and whatever it might be, it might be for healing, for recovery. It might be even just, it goes alongside just working out, and the consistent nature of it. It's, you don't have to go incredibly hard in whatever you're doing right now in the present tense. It's about this building this consistent nature and habits that really has like transformed my outlook on life and the ability. And that also even kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with, for years, we were consistently nurturing our passions without any reward, and it was just a consistent little bit each day. And that's what brought us to here today. So I think that, if the audience wants to take anything home today, it's consistency is such a valuable portion of our life while we're living it.
For sure.
So I'll move on to health. So this is kind of more like the present tense. How do you rather than recover in the current moment, stay healthy, keep a good mindset, and keep moving forward?
Just a little bit of vitamin D every morning.
Right. I like that.
It's I think it's a big component of that is self-awareness. Health can take on many things to many different people, but I think for the most part, people are hopeful that they can wake up in the morning with a decent amount of energy to accomplish the tasks that they need to during the day, and then hopefully also do some things that they want to every day. And those can be individual things with your family, with your friends, at work. And so over I would say I've become much more conscious of this in the past decade, but I've just tried to put things in place in my life that make the things that make the biggest impact for me easier to attain. So I know how much sleep that I need to function well the next day. And I know that if I don't get it, that I'm going to pay for it a little bit. And sometimes I don't get it, but I understand why I'm not feeling well. Same things with simple things like drinking water or eating real food as opposed to processed food, or addressing stressful situations in relationships when I can, instead of letting them linger and grow and harbor in bitterness. Exercising consistently, and I think also a big challenge, probably the biggest challenge for me now, is trying to always maintain a balance between work and play, and just making sure that I do allow a little bit of time over the, it might not be every day, but over the course of every week, to set aside some time for myself. And play can look so different to so many different people, but that's just an opportunity for me to do something that I love and want to do. Not, and I try to leave time for that even when things get pretty busy.
Yeah. And, I would be remiss if I, did a Hickory podcast episode without talking about our relationship with nature. And, as a friend of yours, I know that you are an avid Frisbee golf player and, connoisseur. Explain to me a little bit about, your relationship with nature, if that helps you keep healthy and or your relationship with Frisbee golf. I think that obviously Frisbee golf's in nature, so I could couple that question together.
I would say in general that I haven't done the greatest job of being consistent in my exposure to nature over my life. That is one that I kind of take in big doses, and I think a lot of people do that. They'll take make sure that I have one trip a year that I get out away from technology for 5 days or whatever.
The escape, right?
Yeah. And then personally, in my case, it's been more like every couple of years for a month at a time. Like I'll take these big trips, these long road trips, these big camping excursions, or go to a new part of the world and kind of get out there. So I've certainly had some experience in nature. Disc golf is something that I picked up during the pandemic when there was not a lot of things to do. And this was a very, what I call it, the most COVID friendly sport or activity that there was. Because you're outside, you don't have to be close to anyone. Everyone has their own equipment, so you don't have to share anything. And a lot of people picked up this pastime, including me, and I love it because it does allow me a consistent opportunity to get outside. And I have a weird schedule where I often have 1 to 3 hours free in the middle of the afternoon where everyone else is working, and that's something that I try to do when I can, is just go out and walk around in the park and throw the Frisbee for an hour or so a few times a week. And it's always serves as a great reset for me. Obviously, there's a million different ways that you can get into nature, but if I feel very blessed to have found one that I like to do, and for this period of my life, and I would encourage people to find those if they don't have them. And it can be so simple. It can be going for a walk or walking your dog, or going and sitting on a swing in the park, and it can be very meditative and reflective and refreshing if you can just create even 15 or 30 minutes a couple of times a week to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great answer. I know that you've asked me a couple of times to come play with you, and I haven't gotten out yet, but I promise, maybe when I get back from Australia, we'll get it. We'll make it happen.
Hey, Will, can I ask a stupid question?
Yeah, what's up?
I'm like the normal person. And all of my people that are friends of mine that do CrossFit, they're so buff, right? They look so amazing, including Anne. Yeah. And it's like it's intimidating because I have not done CrossFit. Every time I stop by the CrossFit gymnasium where it is in Park City, all of these buff women come out, and and I just feel like, is it too late for me to start? And I think that that's not unusual for people like me, where we look at all these buff people come out and go, we love CrossFit, and they look freaking amazing. And I'm like, how can I jump in now? Can I really get in now? And I think that's a challenge for some of us, a little bit older people like me.
Well, it doesn't have to be old. Even there's a tons of demographics of people that can feel that way about CrossFit, and like I alluded to earlier, the sport can sometimes have that potentially negative effect where it's like, man, that's really fun to watch and impressive, but I can never be like those people. And you can certainly have that experience at a local gym too, because you are completely right, Sharon. There are some incredibly impressive physical transformations that take place in a CrossFit gym. But there are also a lot of them that are just normal, everyday people. In fact, the majority of us are. And there's, in my opinion, and I think pretty much everyone who's working in the CrossFit space would agree, is that there's no exception. So someone who can come to a CrossFit gym, there is a possibility that you could have a coach that doesn't understand that and that would be disappointing. But I think that that's few and far between. I've been to well over 100 gyms, and I've only have had one negative experience in a CrossFit gym. And when I think about that time, I just think, well, maybe that guy was having a bad day, because it was such an outlier compared to everything else. But it is equally, if not more, exciting for me when someone comes in with that kind of a mindset of, I don't know if I can do this because fill in the blank, because I know that they can. All it takes is a little bit of trust, and then the willingness to show up. I always tell people this, and I especially encourage coaches to never lose sight of this, that the most difficult part about any workout is showing up.
Yep.
And once you get there, I can guarantee you that you'll do something that's productive, and you'll leave feeling better than when you came.
Good. See you in Park City next week.
Yeah, I love that personal experience. A whole variety of demographics were in my 430 class, and the thing about CrossFit is you can also scale back according to kind of what's comfortable with you. And as long as you have a good relationship with your coach and you kind of figure out that equilibrium, I found a good one for me. That was where I wanted to be and see myself progress, and it was all flying colors from there. I really, 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 really enjoyed my experience. Shout out Wyatt Woods, shout out CrossFit Pacific Coast. Loved my time there and hope to be back soon. So then let's finish off the Triple H. Hope. What motivates you? Where do you want to be? What keeps you going? Obviously, we talked a little bit about how you love helping other people. Is that what gets you out of bed every morning? And I want to hear it from you, Brian.
Well, I'm going to be authentic here, and I suspect maybe a little bit unorthodox, but maybe not. I don't spend too much time thinking about the future. I had in my past periods of time where I did that quite frequently, and then I had a job. This was between finishing college and going to the Dominican Republic, where I worked for a guy, and I worked for him for about 5 months as his personal assistant, and I learned like what feels like 10 years of information that I'm not sure I ever wanted to know, mostly about the major crises in the world.
Yeah.
During that time, there were moments where I would walk into a grocery store and I would walk around the entire store and justify buying nothing, because I knew that everything in that store at some level was problematic, whether the way that it was grown, the country that it came from, and how they treat their citizens, the chemicals that may have been sprayed on it, et cetera, et cetera. And that was not going to work so well, because then the only option, if you're actually going to pay attention, if you have that knowledge and know, your only option is to probably move to the Southern Hemisphere and buy enough land to make your own food and get well water. Otherwise, you're ingesting poison, everything you buy from the store, more or less. But our bodies are made to last. Anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent. The point is, I decided back then that I wasn't going to try to solve macro level problems in the world, but instead I was going to do so on a micro level. Mm-hmm. And that by doing so on a micro level, meaning in my communities, in my relationships, in my day-to-day practice, there were certain things that I would strive to be or do or communicate consistently over time. And that if enough people did those within their small little environments, that can make a big difference. And for me, that was a lot more manageable than trying to solve the big problems. I'm aware of the big problems in the world, but I feel that I'm more productive if I address them in a micro level setting. And so when that comes to hope, my hope is that doing things like working hard and being kind, which, as simple as they sound, can go a long way regularly over time, adds up to quite a lot. And it's, I guess that's my mentality when it comes to future things.
God, that was awesome. That opened a lot of can of worms in my head. First, I want to talk about your little tangent. I think that as a part of the younger generation, like, we have so much access to this knowledge where we know all the problems, and all the problems are laid out in front of us, and we can understand them all, and we have access to them. And that's kind of overwhelming at times. We understand all the macro issues, we have access to it, And like you said, you go to a supermarket, you could make a argument that everything in there is like not good for you, or I have to go with this one, or I have to go with that one. And it's so much decision making, knowledge, information that is just overwhelming. It's like, how do we make a simple decision as what am I having for dinner? Nowadays, that even that decision is such we understand it on such a macro level now. Like, we understand, oh, this food is from this country that is going through that civil war, that has going through that regime change. It goes so big now because we have access to the internet and the information. And I think that has an effect, and I don't know what it is, but it has an effect on our generation, because even these smallest little decisions, we can trace it back into that macro environment. I'm not sure if you agree with that, but that's my tangent response to your tangent. But I can get back to the main point here. But yeah, I don't know what you think about that.
You're definitely, I think we're on the same page. It's the access and ease at which information travels. And then we have such an abundance of that information that trying to know what the best thing to do with it is can be really challenging, which is why my general perspective is to keep it simple, keep it close, and really just hone in on trying to be what I understand as a most positive contributor to my small community and group of people, day in and day out. And to do that well means taking care of myself, so that I do get that sleep, that I do eat relatively well, that I do drink enough water, that I do exercise. And if I don't do those things, then I'm not going to be as good of a contributor or a servant or a leader or whatever role I'm asked to be in a given day.
Absolutely. I think that there is, I saw this post one time. It was like, this guy left a Starbucks coffee shop, and he looked up, someone told him, oh, that's actually bad for your eyesight. So he looked up studies that show, or like, can coffee cause blindness? And it says studies show that coffee can help to lead to eye degeneration and blindness. And then he looked up, can coffee help your eyesight? And it says studies show that 2 cups a day helps your eyesight. So it's like, even with all this information, we still can't even make the right decision. So I mean, either it's a catch-22. But to get back to the main point and what you were just talking about, 100%, it's we understand these macro levels, but we kind of you have to break it down to a micro level that is you can make an impact on it on an everyday life, and you don't have to make these such grand ideas come to fruition immediately. And actually the most efficient and best way, in my opinion, and it seems like from you as well, is actually to start small. Start small, start local, start micro, and slowly over time that will change the macro. And I've had a similar path within renewable energy. My mom is an environmentalist, and I grew up an environmentalist, and essentially I was like, all right, when I was 16, 15, how do I solve climate change? And it's as macro as possible. And then, I studied it, I went to school, I learned everything, and then I broke it down. Okay, 60% of carbon emissions are from transportation and from the electricity sector. Okay, so we need to do renewable energy, and we need to transform to EVs. Obviously, I understand there's emissions that go along with that. It's not a perfect solution, but regardless, so break it down from there. I need to help transform the renewable energy sector, and I need to help transform to electric vehicles. All right, so then break it down from there. What company is helping doing that? How do I fit in? What degree do I fit in? Where do I fit in? And then it breaks down to, all right, in project base, daily base, connections, networking. And you can kind of break that macro down into a micro, which makes it manageable. And I think that is what kind of keeps me sane, rather than this grandeur, oh, I want to solve climate change idea. Is breaking it down to the micro. And I think that's kind of, we're on the same wavelength there as well.
Yeah, and I mean, at the very base of the farther you trace that down, it comes to just you. And then what are you doing? And are your decisions, are the car that you're driving, are the way that you're living supporting the bigger visions that you have for those things? And I apply that in the coaching environment. And when I was coaching high school soccer teams, I made sure that those guys knew that I was willing to work hard also. And then if they saw me working hard, then they would, they knew the expectation was that they would work hard. I wouldn't play with them every day. I wouldn't work out with them every day, but once in a while I would. And then they would say, oh, Coach Friend is doing that. We can do that. And even when he's not doing that, we can adopt that mentality of hard work. And it doesn't matter what the field is. If you're invested in it, if you're giving all of yourself to it when you're, during the time that you're doing that task, then that has an impact on the people who are observing you in your line of work.
Absolutely.
That's a great quote. How do we do this? It's just you.
Yeah.
It's just you.
So I just have one last question, and then I can pass it off to Mama and Sharon if they have anything. But it's a very simple, easy question, not going to be hard to answer. What advice do you have for young people?
Well, I don't know that it's necessarily limited to young people. I have seen many people redefine their lives in terms of relationships or work or purpose at all ages of life. And I don't think that it matters where you are. I think that it's a good practice to do some amount of self-reflection on a regular basis and ask yourself, does this thing, whether it's your relationship with your family, with your lover, with your work, with your hobbies, is this thing meeting the criteria that I want? Is it providing for my family if it's your job? Is it bringing me joy if it's a relationship? Is it challenging me if it's a hobby? And if everyone's going to have something that they want. They want to be happy. Are these things making you happy? They want to grow. Are these providing opportunities for me to grow, or am I staying stagnant in my life? So I think that regardless of who you are or what you're doing or where you are in your life, if you can identify a couple things that you'd like to be, again, big picture, happy, productive, and a contributor to society, those may be your three things, then just take a look and see which of the things that I do regularly are helping me get closer to those and which ones are keeping me further away from those. And if you do those two steps, I think that you'll find out real quick which are the things you want to keep in your life, which are the things that you might be better off eliminating. The process of eliminating those things can be challenging and can take different amounts of time. And then from there, you can see if there's things that maybe you want to substitute in to help you move in the direction that you want to move in.
I love that. That was a great answer. I appreciate that. I'm gonna pass it off now to Mom, but thank you, Brian. I really do appreciate your time spending with me and answering my questions. And I think it was very, very inspiring for our audience.
Thanks.
Oh, very much so. Very much so. I think we could continue talking to you for a long time, but I know we need to wrap it up. First, I just wanted to mention you and I have a unique connection. I think you know it. We share the same birthday. You're like the only person I know. Of course, I was born a few years for you, but it's cool. But I do wonder if you're aware in the gym, you kind of have this aura that exudes sort of this calm, friendly, kind persona, but with a laser intense focus. And I think that's a unique combination, but you just exude this. And are you aware of this? And do you do anything to keep it going? Actually, I think I have the answer to that from the talk today, that you do self-reflect and do it, but you really do have this inspirational kind of aura around you that I think keeps all the people going and motivates them.
I might say that I can attribute that to two things. I think that maybe one of the things is that I'm not the owner of the gym, and therefore I'm not involved in the business and the finance side of things. And I think that creates a level of approachability that's, no matter what the personalities are of the owners, that there might always be a little bit of a disconnect there. And I think that it's been nice for us as a group of employers or employees at the gym that I've been able to step into that role a little bit. I think on the on the other side of that is that I just care. that I, and I don't know how to make somebody care about what they do. But when I go there every day, I am conscious of some of the things that I mentioned earlier, which is the people coming there have a lot going on in their life, and they're making a decision to come. And that the hardest part, even the best people in the gym that you think show up every day and there's no chance that they're not, they have plenty of other things they could be doing instead of coming there. And they're deciding to come. And I feel like it would be unfair to them to give any less than my best. And there are days that I'm extremely tired, run down, beat up, not feeling great. But I don't even necessarily try to hide those things. I think it's okay for them to see the human side of the coach too. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to give what I have that day to try to make that time that they're there meaningful for them. So they want to come back the next day or the next time that they were planning to, because in the long run, I know that if they show up consistently, that they're not just their fitness, but that their life will continue to either be good or improve in many ways because of that choice.
Amazing. That's all I got. I mean, I could go on forever, but oh, it's been so wonderful. I don't know, Sharon, do you have any questions?
No, I interrupted throughout this whole interview. I already asked all my questions. So, Brian, thank you so much, because you can motivate people that, like, you heard about me being timid about going to try CrossFit because all my friends are so fit. I feel like I do yoga and meditation and running and hiking and all this stuff, but CrossFit's different. And so it's intimidating to me to start, so it's scary. I'm sure I'm not the only one out there. It's scary for me to just like walk in and initiate my own program. So if there's anything that you could say to people like me, saying, you're not competing with your neighbor. This is for your future health and for your well-being. That's kind of where I would ask your advice about it.
There are probably more stories than you can imagine of people pulling up to a gym or a CrossFit gym and sitting in their car for 10 or 15 minutes and then just backing out and leaving. And maybe they do it many times before they ever walk in the doors. And some of them never walk in the doors. And that's those are the sad stories for me, because they're so close to making a decision that has the potential to turn the corner for them, whatever that corner might be. I am not someone who's going to say you need to go to a CrossFit gym. What I'm going to say is find something that you enjoy, that you can do regularly over time to stay active. And if you can integrate that with some sense of community, even better. Because the combination of those two things is incredibly powerful.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Mom, you want to wrap up with your quote that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I think I found a nice succinct one. That's successful people use adversity to grow and thrive. And I think that some of that's been discussed today. This is another CrossFit guy, Ben Bergeron, probably not the first to say it, and it's been said in many different ways, but clearly, Brian, you show success. You've commented on some of your adversity and how you've used that to grow and to be successful. So I thought that was a nice one. And Sharon, I'll just say real quick, from my experience, I kind of got in before the gym opened. So I'm actually the grandmother or the godmother of the gym, excuse me, not grandmother. I don't do everything that you see people do, but I did notice an immediate difference in my muscles, not immediate, but over a short time in my muscles, that I had muscles that I never had before once I started doing some lifting and in the CrossFit. And of course, for postmenopausal women, doing lifting and weights is key to maintaining the bone health. So I just try to say I do CrossFit light. So I don't do everything, but there is something for all ages. And, you find a good gym like ours that, the coaches are excellent and help everybody get to your own capacity. And I think that's the key.
Absolutely.
Short answer. Thank you.
That, that quote of Ben Bergeron's. Ben Bergeron was that coach for that fittest woman on earth that I did a podcast with, one of my first ever podcasts back in 2018. And it was pretty humbling for me because I used to call Ben Bergeron the Greg Glassman of the East, because he's based in New England. Greg Glassman's based out in California. But Ben Bergeron has taken some of the best practices, not just from Greg, but from a lot of other leaders in the fitness and business world, the mental health world. And he's created something that's very special over there at CrossFit New England. And he's shared it on public platforms for many years now. He's coached some high-level athletes. He's taken everyday people and turned them into absolute savages in the beast, but in the gym. But he also is very, very proactive in sharing mindset practices, daily discipline, lifestyle stuff that you don't have to necessarily do everything that he does, but you can pick and choose and find some very well articulated, simple things to integrate into your life that can help point you in the direction that you want to go. So if you want to check out someone who does that very well, his podcasts and books are a great resource.
I love that. And I appreciate that, letting our audience know different resources that they can, go to pursue more knowledge. I just shout out some of yours. If you want to see more of Brian Friend, you can find him on Barbend. You can find him on various different podcasts. Just simply type in Brian Friend on Google, and you'll also get all of his past articles that he's written, and a lot of CrossFit news. But stay tuned with Brian, keep up with him. And if you want to learn more about CrossFit, reach out to us, and we can put you in touch. And overall, we just really appreciate your time, Brian. It's been a great conversation.
Likewise. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Will.
All right. Take care.